We all feel them. The forbidden, the sinful, the taboo. Behaviors that divide cultures and inspire fear. But our differences may be what make us all human. What does justice mean to you?
Retribution for damages you've done to someone else.
Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth.
2 wrongs to make a right.
It means getting your due, whether good or bad. That's justice.
For most people, justice means fairness, impartiality, and punishments that are not cruel or unusual. But unusual to whom? What one culture finds completely acceptable, another may find taboo.
Different societies have different methods for achieving truth, and there are a whole range of methods that are used.
Now, journey to a West African village, where guilt is determined not by a jury, but by an ordeal of boiling oil. Step into the middle of an Albanian blood feud, in which murder is considered a just revenge. Walk the streets of Houston, Texas, with people sentenced to wear their criminal records on their backs. Literally. And wonder, what kind of justice would be taboo for you? Today in West Africa, most towns have official government courts. But here, tribal customs run deep. In many criminal matters, local chiefs still rule supreme, and their tools of justice can be severe. In the village of Taboo in northern Togo, 2 men are being called to trial. Not a trial by jury, but a trial by ordeal.
My friend, I'm looking for you.
Agba is a farmer and has accused another man of theft. Since the accused thief, Nikabu, denies the charge, he and Agba will soon plunge their bare hands into a pot of boiling oil. People here believe that the oil will burn the guilty, but leave the honest unscathed. It's an extreme form of justice, and both men are convinced it will work.
We need the oil in order to know if he is a thief or not. If he didn't steal, then the fire will burn me. If it was up to me, we would have already resolved this with the oil. When we do the oil, the truth will come out.
Many would place their destiny in the hands of a judge or jury. But would you trust your fate to a pot of boiling oil? Shala Hayiri is professor of anthropology at Boston University.
It may seem very irrational to us, but the idea of divine intervention, divine mediation, supernatural means of resolving conflict, very, very prevalent all over the world.
The origin of the conflict between the 2 men centered on the region's most important crop, yams. Like most farmers here, Agba and Nikabu depend on yams for their survival. For as long as they can remember, they have been friends and labored side by side. But one morning, 3 months ago, things suddenly changed. Agba arrived as usual at his field. But as he opened his hidden storehouse of yams, he discovered that his harvest was missing. The previous night, a thief had slipped into the fields unnoticed, stolen his yams, and disappeared again into the night.
As a farmer, I sell what I don't eat. With this money, I support my family. Now I don't have enough money to buy anything.
Agba suspected his friend of the theft.
I was just sitting here at home. I'm not a thief. Since I was born, I've never stolen anything.
But for Akbar, his friendship and his livelihood were on the line.
We are close friends. We are like the same person. He has done a silly thing, and now my heart is heavy.
Akbar is convinced that the oil will bring closure to his dispute. Outsiders might find it cruel punishment to have to dip one's hands into boiling oil.
There is a sense in which the West, meaning Europe and the United States, are queasy about the idea of corporal punishment. And that's simply not true cross-culturally. And it was not always true in the West either.
John Borneman is a professor of anthropology at Princeton University.
So here, the fact that they use a test of physical pain is not unusual.
In many cultures, tests of pain have been seen as a way of invoking divine insight to reveal the truth. In Europe and the United States, for example, suspected witches once faced trials by dunking in water. In Togo, a trial by boiling oil is only called for as a last resort. Coming up, can an ordeal by boiling oil really identify a thief? And later, life under an Albanian blood feud, where one step outside your home could be your last. Days ago, this tribal court in Togo heard Akbar accuse Nikabou of theft. But with no hard evidence, and Nikabou's persistent denial of guilt, the judges turned to the oil. Today's ordeal will be conducted by Adam, a local fetish priest and healer, whose power over the oil's secrets was passed down to him by his ancestors.
If you and I have a conflict, if there's a disagreement between us, then the oil can resolve it. It is the oil who solves the problem.
One purpose of the ordeal is to force confessions from the guilty. At the same time, since both the accused and the accuser will have to dip their hands into the oil, it's a good protection against false accusations. As they sit before the chief, Akbar and Nikabou are given a final chance to admit wrongdoing and avoid the oil.
Okay, talk.
I left my yams in the field and he stole them. I asked him about it and he said he didn't see anything. Me? Yeah, you. I didn't take it. Leave me alone.
So, should we do the fire? Should we do the fire?
Yes, yes!
Following the court's command, Adam sets off to light the fire. The trial of oil can be done anywhere in the village, but the process must be carried out for all to see.
And in a way, one could see the audience as their participation is a form of compliance.
Kamari Clark is an associate professor of anthropology at Yale University.
We settle it in the open and we make a statement about what should be done here. And not only is the pressure being enforced by the elders, but by society, the representatives of the people who are in the village.
The oil arrives. It is local shea butter that will melt quickly on the fire. A calabash of sacred herb water holds the iron ring that each man will have to retrieve from the oil.
Bring the two men so we can start.
For Akbar and Nikabou, turning back now is not an option.
Let's go.
As a master of the oil's secrets, it is said that Adam can talk to the oil and put his hand in without being burned. The very idea that a boiling pot of oil can decide guilt or innocence would be taboo to many outsiders.
Get out of the way, let us through.
But for these people, it is a fair and trusted way to arrive at the truth. And for both accuser and accused, it is a measure of their conviction.
what you see is a demonstration of the individual being willing to endure pain in order to achieve justice, to whether it be claim their innocence or say something about someone else's guilt. And it's a statement of belief. If you believe it, you're willing to go all the way to do what it takes to achieve justice.
The oil has reached its final boiling point. The moment of truth is upon both men. Akbar is first in line. He soaks his hand in the sacred herbs.
Put your hand in the pot, and then take out the ring.
Without hesitation, Akbar reaches into the oil. He retrieves the ring. The crowd confirms his success. Immediate relief is close at hand. Unlike in a Western court, here the burden of proof rests on both the accuser and the accused. Niqabu is next. Adam commands him toward the oil.
Put your hand in. You say you are not guilty. Put your hand in.
His fear is apparent to all. Face to face with the oil and a jeering crowd, Niqabu relents. Amazingly, this extreme ordeal seems to have identified the thief. His nervous smile betrays his embarrassment.
Are you guilty or aren't you? Okay, I'm guilty, I'm guilty. Bring us the yams that are left. Now, do you accept? Yes!
As Akbar soothes his hand, Niqabu is offered a final chance to return to the oil and clear his name.
No, I'm guilty, I'm guilty.
Niqabu must now bring what's left of the stolen yams to the court. In cases like this, public humiliation is an important part of the punishment.
You have betrayed us. I'm going to beat your head with this stick. You have betrayed us, thief. Bring them here and I will show you. Put it on your head so that people mock you.
That's part of the punishment. The punishment is being judged by one's community. And in some ways, that can be the most treacherous because honor in many places, in most places, is fundamental to peoplehood.
For his crime, Niqabu must replace the stolen yams and pay a fine of $20, roughly a month's salary. Following tradition, he will also present the chief with a ram and a white cock. Chances are, Niqabu will think twice before stealing his friend's yams again.
It was just an argument between me and my friend, and I lied. I thought it would remain between us, and didn't know the oil was so powerful.
For Akbar, the trial by oil has brought the finality he was seeking, and paved the way for his friendship with Niqabu to resume.
I forgive him. Because he is guilty, he will now watch over my fields. So now I am happy.
What is important is more the relationship between the people, not to have for a person to win and for another to lose. The idea is to put them back on the old relationship so that they can continue the relationship they had before the conflict broke.
Righting wrongs is a key function of most systems of justice. But what if the way of righting a wrong is another wrong? Modern legal systems don't follow the principle of an eye for an eye, but there are places that do. Places where revenge is expected, rather than taboo. The first commandment tells us thou shalt not kill. But what if someone murdered your child? And the local police let the killer walk free? What if revenge were your only way of achieving justice? At a funeral in northern Albania, a community mourns the death of Dila Kuvendi. Yesterday, a man shot Dila between the eyes as her daughters looked on in horror. The killer, a rejected suitor, had been stalking her for weeks while her husband was working overseas. It's an outrageous crime, but many would find the community's idea of justice equally shocking. An eye for an eye is the rule of the land. Tradition demands that the Kuvendis kill the killer, or a male member of his family. According to an ancient code of law called the Kanun, Dila's family must take revenge or face dishonor. The Kanun says an offense to honor is never forgiven. A man who has been dishonored is considered dead.
The feud is very much connected with the idea of honor. A wrong done to the lineage is an attempt to dishonor the family, and the honor of the family has been besmirched. So they have to take they have to take actions to restore that.
But taking justice into their own hands could prompt a brutal cycle of revenge, fueling a blood feud that could go on for generations. Dila's family knows all too well what can happen.
These things are dangerous. I kill you, you kill me, and everything gets out of hand. Families and tribes are disappearing, and this is why the state should do something.
Even if the bereaved family preferred state justice, it may not be an option. Blood feuds have been part of Albania's history for centuries. They were repressed by a harsh communist regime. But when the communist state fell in 1991, the practice flared anew. The police and courts, once powerful forces of order, had become weak. Now, even though the state forbids revenge killing, killers are seldom prosecuted, and capital punishment has been abolished.
They catch the criminal, they imprison him, and after 3 months he's out again. That is not good enough.
Many police hesitate to enforce the law in blood feuds, frustrated by an ineffective justice system and fearful that they and their families could become embroiled in the blood feud. It leaves victims with few options.
People realize that the state is not there to avenge them, to help them to seek justice. So then they take the law into their own hands and they become vigilantes. Because blood feud is a form of vigilantism. And then they administer justice the way they see fit.
Now, while enduring the pain of Dila's death, the Kuvendis must choose between a legal system in which they have little faith and a bloody tribal code.
We don't think the state will catch the killer because there are a lot of times when they don't.
They sit and calculate murder.
If the state does nothing about it, well, I'll send the killer to death as he did to Dila, or he will have to kill me too.
But if the Kuvendis seek to avenge Dila's death, it is likely to start a new blood feud, changing their lives forever. Blood feuds in Albania are taken to the furthest extreme. It's a way of life almost impossible for outsiders to imagine. Men remain trapped in their homes for years on end, unable to work for fear of being gunned down. They can't feed their families, worship in a church, or walk down their own street. Children of feuding families are unable to go to school. Some have never been off the family's property in their entire lives. They've never run in a playground, ridden their bike, or played at a friend's house. Housewives fear to even walk to the corner market, where death may await them. They're left to live on what little they can grow. Many Albanians have been trying to end this cycle of violence. Jin Mekshi is a professional mediator with the Committee for Blood Reconciliation. Since the committee was created in 1991, it has reconciled hundreds of Albanian families. But it's just a start.
There are 2,000 families that shut themselves up in their house. 800 children that do not go to school. It is something terrible for our country.
Jin hopes to transform Albanian notions of justice one individual at a time. 6 centuries of tradition stand in his way.
When there is a live case that we are trying to mediate, sometimes these people say, "Why are you here? We want revenge. You should not be here."
Since medieval times, Albania has followed the written laws of the Kanun, which lays down very specific remedies for righting wrongs, including revenge. If someone abuses me and I kill him, I incur blood. Blood is never unavenged. The Kanun has provided a consistent, if brutal, system of order.
The Kanun was a kind of constitution. It does not state that people should kill one another. What the Kanun says is that when there is a killing, it should be revenged, because that was the only way to have justice.
As strange and horrific as it may sound to outsiders, the notion of a blood feud based on family serves a valuable function for the community.
One can imagine that this could escalate to the village as a whole because kinship networks are extensive, or it could escalate to a whole region based on some form of alliance. So to keep the man sequestered keeps the conflict within this particular family or between two families. So in this way, it's a method by which the conflict is not allowed to escalate.
Today, on remote village streets, the ancient system of justice has warped into lawlessness.
Since the day we were founded, we've tried to reconcile cases of blood feud, as well as intervening in disputes before any blood is shed. That is our mission.
Coming up, meet a man targeted in a blood feud who's been trapped in his home for 10 years. And later, a Texas judge brings an age-old punishment into the 21st century. Hoping to end the violence for one Albanian family embroiled in a blood feud, today, mediator Jin Mekshi meets with Naim Selimi. For 10 long, grueling years, Naim has lived secluded from society in a compound with barricaded walls. He tells Jin the story of how his ordeal began.
I remember it as though it was 10 days ago. It was not meant to happen.
Naim's feud started on a fateful night 10 years ago, when he and friends were drinking at a bar. As the night grew late, an argument turned violent. Fearing for his life, Naim ran, but his friends continued to attack.
They knocked me down, and they were attacking me. I said, "Please, don't hit me."
Naim pulled out a gun and fired a deadly shot. The courts, ruling that Naim acted in self-defense, gave him a short jail sentence.
My God, it wasn't my fault. I didn't mean to do it. If they attacked you, what would you do?
But the victim's family claims their honor remains violated. To redeem it, Naim or a member of his family must die.
I live in fear. I don't sleep. Last night, the dog started barking at 2, and I woke up. I couldn't go back to sleep. Of course, it is understood. It's horrible. Spend the night here. You'll be surprised to see how we live in fear for our lives.
For outsiders, living under this form of tribal justice may seem incomprehensible. Tradition permits that Naim or his family may be killed if they leave their property. Trapped in his home, Naim is unable to work. Not even his children are safe from revenge, so they can't go to school and must play at home instead. Although there's a nearby market, it's too dangerous to shop there. Name's family struggles to survive off greens from their garden and animal feed.
There's nothing more terrible than you being healthy, being able to work, but you cannot work. And all you do is sit around the house, watching your children having nothing to eat but corn.
The family has lived like this for close to a decade. Their situation is more desperate than ever.
It happens once in a lifetime. And you wonder how this could happen to me.
Jin leaves Name with the promise he will try his best to help. The only hope is to arrange a truce with the family of the victim. It won't be easy for people unaccustomed to forgiveness. Although the victim's family has their freedom, they're also suffering. The pain of their loss is still fresh.
The killer continued to shoot my son, even after he was dead. That is not right.
Even though they're tormented by their son's death, the parents want to forgive Name.
I think of this as coming from my soul. I want to follow God's way on this one. God says to judge right.
But they are unable to end the cycle of killing because their sons insist on revenge.
The two main reasons they will not forgive, they are filled with the pain they feel for their brother, and the second, young guys, they judge in a rush, and they don't think of the future.
Without the forgiveness of the entire family, there will be no truce. Jin leaves, having earned only a promise that the father will again ask his sons for peace. But in blood feuds, the concept of killing for honor is reinforced by family and community.
Sometimes there are people who intentionally push for revenge. If people are thinking about reconciling, this person will go to them and say, "What are you thinking? Why will you not take revenge?"
After centuries of personal justice, murder has become a civic responsibility. It has been 6 days since Dila Kuvendi was killed. Her family must now decide whether to follow an old tribal code or a new system of justice, and whether redeeming their own honor is worth risking the safety of future generations. Whatever the Kuvendis decide, as long as the state legal system is weak and cultural values strong, blood feuds in Albania are likely to continue. Honor is usually a personal matter. But in the impersonal world of the modern legal system, there are some who are advocating a return to older, more intimate forms of punishment. Punishments that involve the mirror image of honor: shame. Houston, Texas, one of the fastest growing metropolises in America. But among the modern buildings still lives the Old West, and an age-old form of justice: shame punishment. Criminals are being sentenced to advertise their crimes in public.
I've normally allowed some friends to use stolen credit cards. I gotta do what I gotta do, take my punishment. You or me, would you want to be filmed? Would you want to do this? It's pretty humiliating. I've had a Coke thrown at me, and I know a lot of people around this area.
This is harder than prison. A lot of people know me, and brings shame to you, and the family members. Last time I heard this, I had guys spit at me. They got proven an unusual punishment. I got a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I wouldn't want them to see me carrying this. Go ahead for 2 years.
Some say this is taking justice too far.
This kind of medieval way of humiliating someone.
It's the same as we don't allow you to take people down to the public square and humiliate them and whip them.
Well, the stockade will be back pretty soon.
I think public humiliation is a mistake, generally anywhere in the world.
Houston's criminals have one man to thank for these humiliating punishments.
I want to make an impact on the offender, impact on the victim, and impact on the community.
In true Texas style, Judge Ted Poe of the Harris County District Court has brought back a big, bold way of punishing criminals.
All rise. 228th Criminal District Court of the great state of Texas is now in session. Honorable Judge Ted Poe presiding.
I call it public punishment. The person will be punished publicly for the crime they have committed. You will be required to carry a sign stating your offenses at both locations of the forgery and the theft case, stating the offense. Most of us care about what people think of us. If we're held up to public ridicule, public embarrassment, we don't like it. And it will change conduct, it'll change attitudes. So I call it public punishment. I reviewed your file, and you're on probation, but also this is your...
In a legal system that treats offenders as faceless numbers, these criminals are being made accountable for their crimes in a very personal way.
You will be required to carry a sign stating your offense. So they are required to become responsible citizens, as opposed to irresponsible citizens, which happens many times when we put them in prison.
While very few judges broadly employ public punishment in the United States, it parallels efforts aimed at specific crimes, such as publishing the names of Johns who frequent prostitutes.
The court is going to require, though, that the sign that you have brought with you today, that you carry it today.
It's an attempt to cut down on repeat offenders. Judge Poe first tried the idea of shame justice in 1997. Since then, he has handed out over 600 shame punishments. And they seem to work. Fewer than 11% of the criminals Judge Poe sentenced to shame punishments have returned to a life of crime, as opposed to 31% of those released from prison. To understand where Judge Poe got inspiration for shaming people, just ask him where he comes from.
I'm a native Texan. I'm proud of the fact that I was born here. I think some of these punishments kind of come out of the days of old Texas.
Days when a person's character and their rank in their community meant everything. Law enforcement used shame as a deterrent up through the early 19th century, like this jail cell on wheels, in which criminals were paraded through the streets.
In the old West days, Texas didn't have a lot of jails and prisons. And so people were punished publicly. And we've gotten away from that because we claim we're so civilized now, we don't do that.
But the roots of shame punishment in America lie in colonial days, when the Puritans placed offenders in public stockades, and adulterers could be branded with a scarlet letter.
If you look at the history of the criminal justice in the U.S., colonial times, many petty crimes were punished and shamed publicly, so that everybody would know what this person has done, so that that would be a lesson to the person not to commit that again, or lessons to the public not to commit such acts.
In medieval times, many punishments were public, from executions to stretching on the wheel, and later, whips and canes and the stockade. But most societies have since moved to more civilized penalties. Coming up, he killed 2 people driving drunk. Is his punishment too cruel, or not cruel enough? For some criminals, shame justice has done more than change their conduct. It has given them a new lease on life.
I have to carry a sign because I was convicted of 2 counts of intoxicated manslaughter, 1 count of intoxicated assault. On November 28, 1996, I was drinking and driving.
Michael Hubacek was so drunk that he couldn't remember driving into a minivan at over 100 miles an hour. Barbara Davis, her husband Richard, and their housekeeper Rosa were returning from Thanksgiving shopping.
I came to the sidewalk, freezing cold and in terrible pain. And I said, "What happened?" And he said, "You've been in a terrible wreck."
The wreckage spread over 4 city blocks. Barbara almost died. Her husband of 20 years and her housekeeper were killed instantly.
Losing my best friend, my future, the plans, gone.
Michael pled guilty to 2 counts of intoxicated manslaughter and 1 count of intoxicated assault, and was facing a sentence of 10 to 40 years in prison. and he didn't seem to care.
When Michael, came up here the first time, he had a bad attitude. He thought he was above all this. And I think he had a real bad attitude about what he had done, the value of life that he had ruined.
Judge Poe and the district attorney sentenced Michael to 6 months in prison and gave him a slew of unusual punishments intended to change his attitude by never allowing him to forget that he killed 2 people. For 10 years, he must place flowers on the victims' gravesites, write letters of apology to the victims' families, carry a picture of the victims in his wallet, speak at high schools and counseling groups about the accident, and periodically carry a sign. Michael must walk with his sign for hours in 100-degree heat. But it's not the heat that's the most difficult thing to bear. It's the shame.
These people look at me and all they see is, me and then my sign. I guess there's just a lot of shame in that, that I'm being judged for, just words in the paper and just my actions. All they think, is like, he's a murderer, he's not a good person. They don't really know me, per se, like what I've done or what I've been through.
Today, he is halfway through his 10-year probation. This is the 10th time he has carried his sign at the scene of the accident.
The victim is never just an individual. The victim is the society which loses its trust. So what we're really redressing is this issue of trust here by forcing the wrongdoer to come back into the community and engage in some form of redress. And these shaming procedures are very effective.
At first, I didn't understand it. I was angry. I didn't know, I didn't understand how this could help me, I had to live with the remorse. I had to live with the pain of, the actions I caused. It was with me for the rest of my life. It's like when I'd wake up, I'd look in the mirror, and I'd know what I did.
A parole officer accompanies Michael, in part to make sure he does his time, but also to protect him from the actions of angry passers-by. Some call shame justice taboo because they see it as cruel and unusual punishment. But for others like Barbara Davis, shame punishment isn't cruel enough.
Look at him. What does he pay? What price does he pay? A few little embarrassing moments? A little discomfort? I would have liked him to have been in prison at least 10 years, full 10 years, of course. I'd like him to have been there forever, but that's because he was a murderer. A murderer is a murderer.
Instead, part of Michael's sentence has been to talk to groups about the accident, including other alcoholics.
I remember laying there in the hospital and thinking, how did I get here, And 2 police officers being like, you just killed 2 people. And from that incident, it's like my life completely changed.
Michael's punishments are tools for reaching other people.
One of the conditions was I had to carry a sign on Westheimer saying I killed 2 people while drinking and driving. They also told me, the last condition is for the next 10 years I have to carry pictures of my victims in my wallet. But when I go to school or I go to a group of people and I reach my wallet and I pull out a picture of the people I killed, and I'm like, look, these are the people's lives I took, And then they look at it and it makes it more personal. I took two people's lives. And let me play.
I want to make an impact on the offender, impact on the victim, and an impact on the community. So maybe we need to think of justice a little bit differently.
For some, this form of shame justice still seems taboo. But whether it's too cruel to the criminal, or not cruel enough for the victim, this throwback to an older world seems to be having an impact in the new one. Is it fair to make someone dip his hand into boiling oil? Reasonable to publicly humiliate someone? Righteous and just to avenge a murder with another murder? You might say no, but for some, these punishments fill a need that more conventional forms of justice may not. For the scales of justice balance differently in different cultures, and swing between the accepted and the taboo.